There's nothing that is magic. The only thing that comes even close is a Fairchild. But the plugins of the Fairchild are awesome. They do what the hardware does. So I think that that's part of it, is it's really just, you read about these pieces of gear or whatever that are supposedly better than other pieces of gear, and you just think that all of the stuff that's really hard is because you don't have that, and that is just never the case.
So when you do an album physically, if we need the Chili Peppers mix on 2 studios, physically how much room would that take? Because the reel's about this big, right?
Well,
so you need a room for the. And then they want, can we have that song? And you have to go into the room.
I don't remember exactly how much tape on the Chili Peppers record, but the first Audio Slave record, we had 275 reels of tape.
And they're about this.
Yeah, everyone's 2 inches by 12 inches and weighs 12.5 pounds a stone. So, yeah.
So we want to hear that song. You go, oh, heck.
Well, it's not even. Yeah, it's like, oh, okay, now I want to sing on that.
Give me 20 minutes.
And then you get the tape out and realize, oh, we were going to put the chorus from that other take in and no one's done the edit yet. Give me an hour, because I need to safety it first, because if I screw this up, you'll kill me. So there's great stuff about tape, and if you get a chance to mess with the tape machine, like learn it inside out, it can be great, but it's much more about things that people still do, which is limiting the number of tracks you've got. But you can do that in software, and you should do that in software. The last Radiohead record was 16 tracks. It was 16-track tape and laptops, and that's it. But it had to fit on 16-track tape or they wouldn't use it. So a lot of those drums are recorded to 1 track, possibly 2. Like, that kind of thing will change your creative flow and the way you think about things. And also, the biggest thing is making decisions as you go. And for production, I think that is the most important thing you could ever do, is to commit to things. But instead, everyone sort of leaves all the options open till the end, because then you can make it perfect. And all that means is probably 80% of the stuff you hadn't bothered deciding about, you won't even look at again, and you won't change it. It's just going to be however you left it. So you might as well bounce it together, and then it's just one thing instead of 12 things or whatever.
Do you think it's a part of the reason also why some of the Beatles records was so good, because they had to kind of make decisions and mix them down to 4 tracks from one to another?
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely part of it, but there were plenty of horrible records getting made at the same time. So it's the Beatles. I mean, a massive part of it is George Martin and then all of the engineers. I mean, I don't want to. A lot of people will pick out one of them or whatever, but all of them, they were just an astounding group of engineers. But it was also that because of the way they recorded everything live, including the 3-part harmony, while they're down in the studio working out the song, it could be 2 hours while the engineer is upstairs, like changing things and trying stuff and whatever, and nobody's over his shoulder saying, I want it to sound like this, or come on, let's hurry up, because they were too busy working out the music and hoped when they got upstairs to the control room, like, oh yes, that's going to sound like just what we want it to be. But that was just a magic thing, I think.
But my point being is the decision making of combining everything to one, and that's it, and we're off.
Yeah.
Which we should all do, and I find it very hard to do sometimes.
It is.
Especially if I'm in a rush, and if you've only got direct outs on the console, that's another. Preamps is another thing.
Yeah.
If you've only got preamps, then summing is not possible, therefore. So it's a modern problem.
Yeah, it is, but you can take those preamps into individual aux tracks and bust them to one audio track, which if that doesn't make sense, don't worry about it. But like, you don't have to submit to like the easiest way to do something digitally, because it's really easy to do any of the difficult stuff. It's really easy to combine 60 microphones down to a stereo track. Doesn't mean you should always do it, but if you kind of know what you want it to sound like, just go ahead and hit record. So yeah, it's possible.
So the antithesis of that question is Pro Tools. How much do you love that, and why did you get into it? Did you see it coming and thinking I need to be on that train, or?
Kind of, yeah. Yeah, I was using the Synclavier, which had direct-to-disc, which was some of the first digital recording. It didn't have a mixer at all, so each track had an input and an output, like a tape machine. It was just hard disks instead of tape. And you could do some editing, but that's it. There was no mixing. And I went, it was during the Michael Jackson record, I think I went to the Avid, Digidesign office in Manhattan, and they had the very first TDM system, which had plugins, like the very first plugins. I saw a demo of it and thought, oh, right, that's going to happen. And they lent us one to use on the record, and after the second day it wouldn't boot, so we never used it. So about 3 years later...
A good advert for them on the mic.
Yeah.
Here's our great system. Ooh,
but 3 years later, you know, it was robust.
They should have hired you to fix it.
No. Then yeah. I mean, absolutely. As soon as you saw what editing you could do, so the combination of the digital thing where stuff basically sounded like what you put in, and then the non-linear editing stuff with screens, and I mean, that was absolutely that. That wasn't, anyone who said that wasn't the future was just being difficult, I think.
So you got on that train?
Yeah, oh yeah, immediately.
So I was just thinking, career-wise, I mean,
all I care about is it exciting? And for that, you've got to be in the world of the mix itself so that you don't kid yourself by saying, yeah, it's really bright and the guitars are loud. But when you get to the chorus, you're kind of like, whatever. I need to get like, wow, the chorus is amazing. And then hope that it sounds good enough to go accept the mix based on how it feels and not necessarily what it sounds like.
That's quite interesting. Of what I understand, I'm sure a lot of other mixes do. You reference constantly.
Most
Spike
do.
Stent will
Yeah.
they'll go through 6 different things. That's the bass there, that's the kick drum roll, that's the feeling I like on this, and
Yeah.
there's reports of him running through them in relation to his track to put him in there.
I just find myself copying specific aspects of those mixes that have nothing to do with what I'm doing. So it's my own inability to do it. It's not that it's a bad idea. And while you're learning, it's a great idea. Absolutely. And the only thing to keep in mind is that a lot of the stuff you're going to be referencing is probably much louder than you're going to be able to do while you're starting to mix. So turn it down while you're referencing. Don't do equal levels and hope you're going to be cool, because you won't be. So try and make it a level playing field. Level. Get it?
Yeah.
That's good.
Well, we'll get on to mastering, or maybe
Yeah.
or is mastering a good time now?
Hey, whatever. Whenever you
Yeah.
want.
So how, you say yourself you mix loud,
Very.
and I've heard you say that mastering engineers aren't always that happy with you.
No, a lot of them hate me. Yeah.
So I mean, how loud should we be going now? Have we crossed that peak? Because I was going to talk about Deaf Magnetic, but you didn't.
No. Look,
Let's get over it.
the loudness war's over because I won. That's the...
Can we quote you on that?
Yeah. You can.
Oh, wow.
Look, I think that for me, it's about how a mix feels, and it's not as simple as just turning it up or down. You could take one of my mixes and turn it down. You can gain it down so it's a sausage-looking waveform that doesn't go all the way up. That's fine. I don't care. Do that. But if I turn it down, it's always a trade-off. And some of it is just distortion. Clipping is extra top end, right? If your waveform turns a corner faster, that's brightness. And that's exciting until you go too far, and then it's just clipping. But when I bring my mixes down, I'm always finding the spot between a level I think somebody will say, okay, yes, we'll take this mix because it's not completely ridiculous, and it still feels really exciting to me. And different projects have different thresholds for that. Like the Green Day record is a lot quieter than a lot of the other rock stuff I've mixed because they really wanted it to be open. They were more worried about the cymbals not sounding like they were sucking backwards on every kick and snare hit because of the way the mix was folding up than they were about the fact that I felt like maybe the chorus didn't feel as aggressive. Like they were okay with that. But other projects like the CRX thing that Josh Homme produced, that needed to be really loud. It would not be the same record if it were quieter. So it's nothing to do with level for me. It's absolutely to do with how the mix feels.
And do you think that post you giving it to Master Engineer that the competition for things being loud in each other is kind of now waning due to Spotify and Apple Radio and stuff having a sort of an averaging effect on?
Yeah, I mean, look, I never saw that side of the so-called loudness war, but I never saw that. No one ever said to me, and this has to be as loud as this, ever. But apparently, mastering engineers were bombarded with that from labels, and sometimes artists. It's got to be as loud as the Green Day record, another band that wants to be in that world. And that's relevant, but I think that it's just not, I don't know, there wasn't this race to the bottom to see who could make the loudest record. Because look, if you take all the records from the 80s and early 90s, they're not that loud, right? But you listen to them on the radio, and they're squashed to hell. And they sound totally different than if you listen to the record. Because the radio stations are adding a ton of limiting and a ton of EQ, especially in the States. There's this series of stations called K-Rock. And they sound totally different from every other radio station. So in a way, if I make my mix really loud, they can't do anything to it. It'll sound exactly the same on the radio. So I already know what it's going to sound like when it gets destroyed going through any sort of broadcast type thing, which includes the mastering for a lot of the streaming services. They're doing the same kind of stuff. So in a way, I'm just doing it so we all know what it's going to sound like, as opposed to presenting the artist with something that no one in the rest of the world will ever actually hear. Part of my theory.
I was just thinking, CRX, shall we move on to that? I switched my phone off to not be annoying, and I don't know what time it is. So, but we said about half an hour. Where are we? What's the time, guys? Oh, beautiful!
Look at that. 3 minutes off, actually.
Oh right, good. Right.
It's winter.
Sun's not aligned properly. So yeah, I mean, I was just thinking it'd be interesting to see some techniques, right? Just to see like what you do. Obviously, we can't go through the whole mix because that would take...
I mean, and I've got a lot of stuff with me, but I figured because this video exists online. So this is CRX, which is Nick Valenci, the guitar player from The Strokes. It's his solo project thing, and Josh Homme produced it. And I mixed this last year sometime. I don't remember. It's kind of somewhere in the first half of the year. And so there is a video that's very in-depth, going through track by track and stuff like that. But I think this is a good mix to show some of my sort of basic mix things. So this is the actual mix session that I printed the mix from.
Or is it the... I'm just going to switch the lights off because of it.
Yeah.
I don't need to pause it.
Well, that might help. I don't know.
So, can you see anything?
Can we see, sort of? There's curtains, maybe? Or do they go across there?
From the back?
From the back? Josh? We'll carry on and I'm sure we'll get a little bit more enlightened.
So this is actually the mix session, and I'm not going to go through a lot of this stuff, but one of the things I would say to everybody in the room, even if you don't engineer, because you are going to engineer your own stuff, you're going to have to do your own demos sometimes or whatever, is make your working environment as familiar as possible and be as consistent as possible, because then you actually don't have to find things. Everything is always there, ready to be found. So for me, that means ordering the tracks, color coding the tracks, listening to the same pair of speakers all the time, all of this stuff, so that the only difference between this mix and any other mix I've worked on in the last 5 years is what song it is. Everything else about it is exactly the same. The kick drum is the top track if there's a kick drum. So that's kind of important, but I'm not going to talk about any specifics to do with it. But I think the more you can erase the technical stuff from being conscious, the more fun you can have and the more creative you can be, because there's a sense of mixing being a very technical thing, because you have to keep pushing buttons to make stuff be different, and you used to have to turn knobs and push faders, and so therefore it's a technical thing, but it's not at all. If you put Al Schmidt in front of a console, all he's going to touch are the faders to get a balance, and his balance is better than anyone else's balance on the planet, and it's going to make the song just come alive. So the more you can make the technical stuff that you just know inside and out and never changes, so that you can get to the fun part, then the more time you'll spend in the weird little creative trance where on this session there's a lot of stuff that I don't even remember doing it. And it's not because it was a while ago or that I drink too much. It's that you get into a thing where you're just following your brain through the session. You think you're working on the drums, but something catches you about the guitar and you go do that, and then you go do this other thing, and you don't remember doing any of it. You think you've done nothing for the last hour, and then you realize, like, oh wow, this actually doesn't sound terrible anymore. So anyway, enough about that. So it's there are drums, and it's a live drum kit, but recorded very stylized. And then there's a little bit of percussion here, tambourine. Then we got bass. Then we got a couple of keyboards. This is like mellotron, flutes and strings and things. Then a lot of guitars, and for each guitar track, wow, what happened? Oh, really? That's not fun. Hold on. Let me restart the session. I guess we'll talk about something else.
Okay.
I don't know why.
Let's talk about Pro Tools and how reliable it is now.
Yeah.
Post 10.
Yeah.
We're still on 10 here, and to be honest with you, I'm quite glad because generally it works pretty well.
Yeah, look,
we're on 12 in the labs, and it won't do session import, and you know, I don't know, we're possibly not on the right version, but
right.
do you think possibly that they mess with it too much? A bit like we're changing operating systems every year, and we don't need to.
Yeah, I mean, look, that is one thing about tape machines, is they didn't have updates. You know, the tape machines that are sitting in my studio in LA that aren't being used work exactly the same way they did when they were first built. So that is a good thing, but yeah, I mean, but you don't have to keep up, do you? No. If you've got a production rig that works great, then just don't touch it. I happen to keep up with things because I beta test stuff, and then there'll always be something that'll happen. And plus, I'm sent sessions to mix. And if I get one from someone using a more recent version of Pro Tools and I can't open it, it's like now I've got to trust them to dumb it down for me. And I don't want to do that. That's why I own almost every plugin out, because I get a session to mix. There's a plugin I don't own, get the demo long enough to see if it's any good, and like, yep, that's good, okay, now I need to buy it.